In an age where transparency is becoming not just a desire but a consumer expectation, how easy is it to foster a reputation that not only resonates with a consumer's conscience but also enables a brand to do good in the world? We are delighted to be joined by two people to discuss this with us. Brand activism and a lot more. Ciro Sarmiento, Chief Creative Officer at DS USA, welcome. And also Daniel Bergmann, Founder and President of Stink.
Hello.
Can a brand even exist without thinking about purpose anymore?
Well, I think that we were discussing this before sitting here, and I think that a lot of brands are doing it, and you know, it depends on if they are really reflecting what society is doing and what culture is doing, and part of that is really walking in agencies and meeting the people and going to these corporate offices. I work in the USA, so is it really happening within the organizations, or is it something that you just do as part of being in the wagon of, you know, diversity and inclusion and all that? So I think that one of our main purposes as creatives or as an agency is to educate and try to involve as many brands possible. So I think it's a very important issue nowadays in agencies and within clients.
How do you find the cultures inside those companies, as far as is the disconnect between sometimes what they do and also how they exist in the world?
Well, I work in the Hispanic market in the U.S., so of course everybody in the agency is from everywhere, like from Spain, Argentina, Colombia, like myself, from the U.S., all over the U.S. And so we, on a daily basis, work with people who are also from other countries and on the client side. So I think that it's a very normal and usually a very general discussion about that, because them and ourselves, we're pushing for that inclusion of diversity within the brand. Sometimes it's hard because it's still a lot of skepticism around the idea of let's break the barrier between general market and U.S. Hispanic, for example.
Yep.
There's still a lot of, you know,
two markets basically.
Yeah, it's two markets.
Perceived at the moment.
And it's very different. There's no minorities right now in the U.S. Like the general market is becoming the minorities. And so what those clients is going to do, what are they going to do when all the majority of the U.S. is just people from all over the world, not just white people?
Yeah. And Daniel, can we just let our viewers on the Digital Pass know that you have won over 100 Cannes Lions?
We did, yeah.
It's incredible.
That was the most humble answer I've
I know, yeah,
We did.
I guess.
We did. I just wanted to say I don't have I mean, it's been over quite a lot of years. So and you know, we are a company which is focused on making relevant and strong work on all levels, including work which is a meaningful, which I think it's these days increasingly more important. I think I was just presenting a show in America. I was the chairman of something called AICP. And we had a panel, and there was an incredible discussion around similar theme. And there was this, I really like this notion of, do they really mean it? And I think that one of the questions I think it's quite simple to look and more complicated to go into detail is, do the brands really mean what they say they do around environment, around diversity, around equality, and do they really have it inside of their own cultures and inside of their own companies? Because one thing is advertising, and one thing is if you really walk the walk, or walk the talk, whatever you say. If you really
talk the talk, walk the walk.
Yeah, if you really address on all levels, internally, externally, the kind of a change in the culture. And I think that's a key thing which has to be, to become to be true, this has to It has to happen
What about
on all levels.
What about your
throughout.
relationship though? Because that's what should happen. But day to day, if you're working with a client and they're not walking the walk, they're not talking the talk, would you still work with them? What do you do? Do you help them come on that journey?
You know, I know it's gonna sound like it's almost a suicidal thing to say from a sort of a production and a digital production company, because we are kind of a third in a chain. We are really after the client agency and us, but we do have discussions internally when we see an obvious case of a brand or a brand and agency just doing kind of a campaign or pretending they're addressing some important issue just in sake of increase the sales. And when we see there's a clear disconnect, we would probably not touch it. And you know, it started a long time ago with things like we would never touch, in the old days, tobacco.
Right.
Then we would debate quite deeply violent games. Then or violent computer games. Then we would discuss oil companies, which would make green campaigns, and we know they actually, we know these cases of BT changing a logo into green logo, green color and things like that. So we definitely do have. We feel responsible. We feel we have part of responsibility to deliver this change and this kind of a movement within our industry.
Well, I think of some of the examples you gave, there's baby steps for an oil company or for a Philip Morris or for any of these organizations that inherently don't do the most healthiest things.
Yes, McDonald's.
Yeah.
But they're taking these baby steps, and so they're caught in this sort of limbo. Do you appreciate the baby steps, or where do you engage your work along their line of transformation?
I do appreciate. I actually do think the baby step. And it's a very good question. I do appreciate the baby steps because I do think the change it's gradual and only steps. Step by step we get there. I think, of course, I think there's another lucky circumstance, which is. I think the new type of consumers these days, the audience or the consumer, I think the new generations are not just buying product because of the taste or the look or the performance, but they're also looking how good that product's for environment, what is the culture of that company. I think there's a pressure now from the market itself. So I actually think that these steps, and we could say brands are getting kind of pushed. And in one hand, it is potentially problematic because it is not natural for brands. But I think there are humans behind brands still. There's the human beings. So, and human beings, when they need for human beings to change their manners or their ways, you've got to be a little bit under pressure. I think I just look. So yes, we look at it more like the humans there. They're a little bit under pressure. We need to all higher, more pressure. We also need to look at ourselves and our own company because we very much look at also ourselves. Because I always say you need to start with yourself to make a change. I mean, if you go and you throw a plastic into the sea, or you throw it in a recycling bin, and if everybody starts with themselves, I think then change, and it applies on brands as well.
Ciro, are you looking at yourself and what you're doing, having similar conversations?
Are you throwing plastic
over there?
Yeah, no straws or plastic. I have to be better at it, but I do appreciate that brands make an effort to become better and to reflect what society is doing. Some of them are active, but that doesn't mean they're part of the brand activism movement, which I think it's more of the trend rather than just being really consistent on what they say. And baby steps are good because that make us believe that, okay, there's an opportunity there that we can do outside a brief or outside a marketing strategy for driving business, but something that really, really connects with people. And people, young millennials or Gen Z, whoever you want to call them, they're audiences that now they're not stupid. They know what they want. They believe a brand or not, and if they don't believe what the brand is doing, they just don't care or don't follow it.
Well, I was going to say, well, coupling that with your sort of a mandate, really, to do award-winning work. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of that being part of your operative, mandate.
Well, it is a mandate to create award-winning work, but that doesn't mean that we only work for awards. It's a total different, fundamental difference. in my agency at this point. I think that the most important thing is create work that is relevant for someone and that makes the brand relevant, but also as a consequence, it gets talked about, it gets a lot of press, it gets a lot of attention, and that is good. And winning an award is a consequence of that, and also helps us retain and attract new talent, which is very important. Brands also care about award-winning work because they know that the bar is really high, and everybody all the time are on social media, and then brands go up and then go down like that. So it's really important to keep relevancy and have the importance.
Well, I think there's that ripple effect too that that allows other people to try to match or do good as well and do as good at doing good.
Yeah, I think that there's big brands have more problems believing in that because of course there's a lot of financial involved and there's a lot of politics involved and all the hierarchy and all that. And I think that, and so we try to do it on a daily basis, focusing on the brands that really care about making a change, and then that becomes contagious and that becomes talked about it. So the big brands will jump into it, and I think that you have to start the movement.
I have to say that besides the baby steps, there are brands who are leaders, and I think that's really important. There are a few brands and more who are becoming to be leaders. We have just presented a few minutes ago a film called The Look, which was sponsored and paid for and all produced by P&G, and it's about race in America. It's about equality. It's about how it's basically a film about how black person really feels these days when they walk in an expensive store, when they get into a situation where they get looks. It's called The Look, the film, and it's an incredible, powerful. And you're familiar with it. It's a very powerful film which we made, and we were extremely delighted, and we felt that P&G really meant it. And so I feel there are brands who are really taking the lead. And I'm looking at P&G as one of the biggest, most traditional brands, and yet they are leading this movement. So I think besides the baby steps there, I really hope it can get accelerated by some of the key players to really take it further and you get really deeply involved in this. I think that's kind of our hope. And it's happening, and it's definitely happening.
Recognize it when it happens.
And it was an honor for us to be involved in that.
We'll look out for that. Ciro, Daniel, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Okay.